'Twas in the pleasant month of May, in the springtime of the year, and down by yonder meadow there runs a river clear. See how the little fishes, how they do sport and play, causing many a lad and many a lass to go there a-making lay. Jim, Grandad, he said, I heard one of our songs on the wireless yesterday. He said, they didn't make much of a job of it, though. There was a bloke in the background tinkling away on an old Joanna. He said, I've a good job to write to the BBC and tell them what a mess they made of it. And say we got about 50 songs like that down in Rottingdean, if they're interested. Well, blow me down, a telegram came next day, and the BBC were extremely interested in a large collection of songs all in one place, because they'd got a programme underway to try and get these songs in before the old people who knew them then passed on and took their lovely legacy with them.
The BBC were interested because they saw folk music as a means of bolstering British identity in difficult times.
From outside broadcast departments and travelogues. Now, what about home?
Well, it'll be mainly music, George.
They teamed up with Cecil Sharp House and began to collect and record folk music from the four corners of the nation. But this time it was broadcast straight from the source.
They opened everybody's eyes because they went out looking for survivals and found that there was a panoramic sort of display still of traditional music from Orkney and Shetland right down to the Scilly Isles, from Kerry across to Norfolk.
The first trip was actually to Durham and Northumberland because I was interested in dances and dance tunes. I was first introduced actually to Northumberland village dancing by Lady Trevelyan, the wife of Sir Charles, who was a historian, you know, who had on one gatepost he had the crown, and on the other gatepost he had a hammer and sickle. So he had a very open mind. I started the fiddle contest at the Northumbrian gathering, which was mainly a piper's gathering, and dragged some of these tall, shy shepherd fiddlers from Northumberland into the... I remember they used only one fiddle. They never got their own fiddles out, but they used the one fiddle for the whole contest. And I came in 9th. I was rather pleased with myself, actually.
Good luck to the barrel, good luck to the barley mow. Oh, it's good luck to the barrel, good luck to the barley mow.
British society was changing then almost faster than it ever had done before. And so there were these traditions which were going to disappear for sure, if nobody cared. It was a discovery thing. You were finding out about, and you were suddenly hearing these new songs, hearing new experiences, hearing echoes from history.
Don't you see the French on yonder hill so high, while those poor lads in the valleys lay?
I always thought Cecil Sharp House was a rather precious view. We've got to preserve the traditions in the way in which archaeologists might pull something up and say, here's an old pot from Roman times. That's totally different from the idea of it being a vehicle of popular expression, with the idea of inspiring people to carry on in order to bring peace and justice and human rights.
Now come all you young sailors and listen to me play, and when you've heard me tell you'll pity me, for I was a goddamn fool in the port of Liverpool.
But while BBC collectors were combing every obscure corner of the countryside, Bert Lloyd, a singer and communist academic, was touring the cities, collecting and performing songs of the working class.
But I wasted all my tin whilst drinking up the gin with a little girl whose name was Maggie May.
Traditional folk song has been a mongrel since the Middle Ages. It's a music subject to adaptation. It changes all the time as people's lives change, as social conditions change, economic conditions change, and so you get a different kind of music.
I found my love on the gasworks croft, dreamed a dream by the old canal.
Another communist busy agitating in the arts at that time was Brechtian playwright Ewan MacColl, who used song in his plays to reach out to a popular audience.
Dirty old town, dirty old town.
Given their shared interests in radical politics and folk song, it was inevitable that MacColl and Lloyd's paths would eventually cross.
Bert and I clicked from the very first moment. We were both agreed that the kind of idea we'd had in Theatre Workshop of winning a working class audience should also be the basis of a folk revival if it was going to take place.
MacColl and Lloyd provided a home for their version of the folk revival in 1954 when they opened Britain's first modern folk club. They called it the Ballad and Blues Club because the idea was to introduce the unfamiliar sounds of British folk alongside music from the more popular American folk revival.
It was all lumped together. Jazz and folk and blues and gospel were all in the same thing. I mean, Big Bill Broomsey came over at that time, and he was booked over here by the jazz and folk promoters.
With the visiting Americans pulling the crowds, Lloyd and MacColl started feeding the audience British folk songs. It wasn't just their shared political ideology, it was the difference in their personalities that made the partnership work.
What was it like? Gosh. You know, he's had eyebrows that came out here. That's what he was like. You could imagine his smile and these eyebrows. And he was fantastic. He was such a character. And I thought at that time, and still do, that he was the most wonderful singer. Most wonderful singer. I mean, it was like having Bert singing a ballad. It would be a bit like having Stephen King read you a book.
To cut him off at the knee, and poor little Johnny Barleycorn they served most barbarously. They hired men with the sharp pitchforks to pierce him to the heart.
MacColl was a little bit tough. Yeah, he had these strict rules. He was very professional and a great singer. He always sat backwards in a chair like this, with one elbow on the chair and a hand propped up behind his ear so he could hear better what he was singing. Like, I am an old-timer, I travel the road, sit in me wagon and lumber me load. Me hotel is a jungle and the calf's me abode, and I'm well known to Blondie and Mary. It was bone-chilling.
My liquor is diesel oil laced with strong tea, and the old highway code was my first ABC, and I'd cut my eye teeth on an old AC, and I'm champion at keeping 'em rolling.
While Britain's first folk club was taking shape, over in America, the folk revival was already on television. Left-wing band The Weavers, led by Pete Seeger, became its public face when they took the songs of Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly to the top of the charts.
We learned this song, Irene, from a friend of ours. His name was Hughie Ledbetter. He called himself Leadbelly, king of